everyone. This is JJ Barrett. I'm the extension agent for Wood County for WVU Extension, and welcome to Mountaineer Farm Talk. Today, September 3rd, we are going to be talking about feeder calf marketing strategies with Dr. Kevin Shaffer. Kevin, how are you doing this morning?
Doing well, JJ, and yourself?
Good. I'm hanging in there. A late drive last night from a meeting. Also with me, I have my co-hosts. I have John David Johnson from Jackson County Extension.
How are y'all today?
And then I also have Evan Wilson from Cabell. What's up, Evan?
Oh, I'm doing just fine. Kind of should have had this class last week. Took calves to the market Wednesday, so that'd been helpful to have. But that's why we're here.
Well, good. We're glad for everyone that's joining us this morning. If you're interested in anything that's related to livestock, nutrition, animal health, forages, pasture improvement, farm management, crop production, country and western music, rural health issues, gardening, horticulture, or any other topic related to farming, join us every Friday at 10 a.m. for the Mountaineer Farm Talk. We'll learn, share, laugh, and enjoy a cup of cowboy coffee. We encourage audience participation, so have your questions ready. Like I said this morning, of course, we're going to focus on an important topic for a lot of producers around the Mountain State, and that is feeder calf marketing strategies. People are now weaning calves or getting ready to wean calves. As before the meeting started, we were talking to Kevin. You know, some producers have already sold their calves, so let's jump right in. We were also talking about some of our prices. Over the last few weeks, our feeder calves were right around that $1.50 mark. And I was just looking up some information on another driver for our market, and that is the commodity corn price. And right now that's about $5.17. Of course, that depends on where you're at, plus trucking and shipping costs. So you may be creeping up to $5.50 to $6 for shelled corn. So Kevin, let's get right into it. What are advantages for some of our West Virginia producers to precondition their calves as far as the marketing strategy?
Well, we've through our preconditioned feeder cattle sales calf pool programs, we've shown over the years that compared to just a traditional graded feeder cattle sale, on the top end of that sale, we're going to add on average about $65, $70 a head through a preconditioned marketing program. Now, there's really two components to that. It's not just the preconditioned process, so having those cattle pre-vaccinated, and most of those would be weaned for a minimum of 45 to 60 days as well prior to shipment. But there's also the value of marketing in a load lot. So in approximately a 48 to 50,000 pound load lot, so we can fill a semi. In and of itself, is if we just look through our market reports, we don't have many times that we get to that point, but we're talking, probably $3 to $4 a hundred just to have a load lot of similar type and kind of cattle, compared to having to piece those cattle together with smaller groups. So really two components there: the advantage of cooperative marketing and load lots, and then also the value of having those cattle really well prepared for the next stage of production.
Yeah, and Kevin, where does this? I know right now we're looking at the actually selling these animals in lots, and then we're going to wean them and put them on feed for 45 to 60 days. But where does the heart of this program actually start with the producers?
Well, it really comes down to, producers that are seeking to add value to their product and being willing to work together. It's some like-minded folks that want to try to add value to their product. They're willing to work with their neighbors to help do that and create additional value for each other. The average person, and there's a lot of different variation in size of people that participate in the program statewide, but the average person adds $3,500 to their bottom line. over traditional marketing avenues in West Virginia across the board. So we've shown over a number of years that there's value in those systems.
Yeah, and the calf
And we
pools
have
around.
also,
Go
JJ,
ahead.
we have Steve with us here, and he's actually one of our producers that is part of these calf sales. He has cattle in the sales, the preconditioned sales as well. So, Steve, what have you seen as on the producer side as the value of these preconditioned sales?
Well, I think, if you look at how long these guys have stayed in us, I think speaks for itself. If you look at, like, for example, the Jackson County pool, I think going on 25 years, so that tells you that those guys have, found it to be successful and they've stuck with it. And that in itself tells you that those guys, and most of these farmers know when they're making money. Most of them are pretty tight and they want to make money. So they've continued with the program and with the vaccination, precondition, vaccinating, marketing their calves, like Kevin said, through a load lot type situation. And because it's been long lasting, tells you that they feel like that it's made them money. I think that in itself speaks to the fact that it's profitable,
But so the money that you put into it, a little extra for the vaccinations and the preconditioning feed to go, to get these cows bunk broke is worth it then, is what you're saying as a producer. And it pencils out on your end that you see as a producer, right?
Yeah. From my own perspective, yes, there's no doubt that if, I'm adding value to my calves, I have a unique perspective because of the fact that I am in the market daily, as a market reporter, and I get a unique perspective from a producer standpoint versus, a seller and a buyer standpoint. The combination of those two, I see that myself all the time, and myself, I've stuck with it, and it's profitable for me. I tell people all the time that ask me about that. I'll tell you this much. I will promise you that when you are involved in some kind of a preconditioning program and a sale like we have set up that we do every year, that you're going to guarantee yourself the highest price that you could get over a regular sale. Now you're going to get that. Now in some situations you may get higher, and that goes back to the fact, for one thing, we have a semi-lot load. But also, some of these guys take that, they'll make them all naturals. It gives them opportunities to sell their cattle for more money that way. And just, and two, to sell the quality of their calves. We'd like to tend to think that a lot of these calves, because these guys and the things we've set forth in terms of the quality of bulls we expect those guys to buy, I think speaks to the fact that the quality of our calves is on average going to be at least average and most typically above average, and so it gives them a chance to sell and advertise and market their genetics as well. A lot of those things going to be profitable, no doubt in my mind. I've seen it over the years that when you're doing this and you're adding value, you are guaranteeing yourself probably the highest price calf sold in a regular sale for that day. You're guaranteeing yourself that. And most typically it's going to be over that.
Okay. And what does this mean? and Kevin can chime in on this too, if he wants there too, because I think both of y'all see this in. What does this mean for the buyer of these calves? That Midwest producer that's coming down here to buy these calves, compared to what he normally sees coming out of this area versus what he's buying with these preconditioned calves. What is he seeing on his end with these cattle?
Well, we hope, and I think for the most part, our track record speaks for itself, that we're selling health and they're seeing that. There's no doubt there can always be problems. We've had problems in the past, but typically the buyer of these calves is going to see two things. He's going to see our goal is he's going to see improved genetics, improved cattle that are high quality, and we're selling health. There's no doubt about that. We're selling health as much as anything. We're trying to sell what we hope is going to be a live calf for that guy. And that's a lot in itself, just to have live cattle, you know, in the midst of all the trucking and all the stress that those cattle go through. You know, it's a big undertaking. Like I mentioned last night in that meeting, you know, mass exodus of cattle from Maine to Florida throughout the year. 9% of the cattle have to end up in the Midwest at the feed yards, because that's where the feed's at. People have no idea the amount of the stress, the change of hands that cattle go through, you know, and everything it takes to coordinate that calf from Maine. If that's where he's going to go, 9% of the cattle throughout the entire year, most of them in the fall, are going to have to go through at least 5 different people. They're going to be owned at least 5 different times by 5 different people. And that's the producer starts that, then a backgrounder, then a feedlot guy, then the processing plant, and then the ultimate end owner of that is whoever buys that meat to eat. But, you know, and we're the start of that whole process, and it's a huge undertaking to take those calves and put them through all that stress and change locations at least 4 different times. And so everything we do as a producer, and that's why we do this program, is to prepare that calf for all that chain of process of going from east to the central part of the United States and having to be put on a feedlot and fattened. So hopefully, you know, what we do prepares that calf for that. And that's always amazing to me, the exodus, the mass exodus of cattle that leave the East Coast and go to central US. And so it's a preparation for that, you know.
I just, you know, add to that in terms of, you think about the value of health to the next owner.
Yep.
You know, of what a shot of an effective antibiotic is going to cost for one treatment on an animal.
Absolutely.
5-weight calf, you know, we're going to have maybe $30 to $50 in a single treatment event on that. And so if we look at the cost of that, you know, if even at the upper end, you know, that's $30 to $50 on a 500-pound calf is equivalent to 8 to 10 cents on a bid price. Yeah. And so, you know, if we can reduce those treatment rates from, you know, say a balling calf coming out of a barn that we may have to treat 35 to 40% of those calves, and we can take that to less than 10%, there's a significant value there to the person buying, that they can spend more on those cattle. So, and still be in the same place financially they would on those balling calves. I mean, they're still going to have an equal profit, and typically they're going to, you know, they're going to account for those things when they build a bid sheet on what they can pay for cattle. I would just step back a little bit to where your prior question, and about, you know, what the value is here, and say this, that no matter what we do, we're price takers as producers. All right, we're not price creators. We don't get to dictate what price we sell our calves for. We're taking whatever price the market gives us. And what our data historically with this program has shown us, whatever the market is, whether it's whatever point of the cycle it is, where we're on a lower price end or we're on a higher price end, these cattle will be a premium to whatever the market is when they're preconditioned and they're ready and they're for that next stage and they're in a load lot. Typically that margin widens when cattle prices are lower. So we actually get a greater premium on a lower price cycle. Things tend to narrow a little bit when we have a higher price cycle of what our margin is over a conventional market and marketing system. But in whatever the market is, and that's what I try to tell producers that participate, you're going to be at a premium to whatever the market is at that point in time or that particular year with this program. But we have to focus on things that we can control, and we can't control what the market's doing, but we can control how we prepare our cattle for the next stage of production and whether or not we have an opportunity to add value to them. We can control those things, but we can't control the market. So if we can control something that allows us to be at a premium at whatever the stage of the market we're in, then that certainly is something that I think we should explore it on and take part in if we feel that we can meet all the requirements for it.
Yeah, Kevin, what is we have any producers out there that are not members of one of the calf pools? What are the requirements there for their calves to be members of the calf pools in West Virginia?
Well, that's going to depend on your local environment. You know, it's kind of something where we kind of oversee the program. We set some structure to it in terms of different, I guess, levels of participation that you want to be at. But then the individual pools get to really dictate rules above and beyond that. So, you know, we want cattle to be sired by performance tested bulls. Those don't have to be bulls from the bull test, all as much as we would like that to be. But, you know, reputation, good genetics is what we would like to have those cattle sired by. And then you just need to get in contact with your local pool group and see what their rules are. You know, things that we require are some guarantees on the cattle. So we guarantee steers to be steers. If they're stags, then there's some penalty fees that go with that. If you sell a stag in there, you know, that's to give back to the buyer. Those are and also bred heifers. If we find heifers that are bred that we're marketing as feeder cattle, I can tell you, you don't want to be on the receiving end of that phone call from a buyer that's bought a set of cattle and it's got dead bred heifers in a feedlot somewhere. So it's a service that we offer as part of a guarantee with the cattle. Just as anybody that's marketing a good product is willing to stand behind it, that's what we expect of people that are participating in this program, is to stand behind their calves. And so, like I said, beyond that, dates, individual things, we dictate what vaccines we want you to have as a complete health program. Which brands you utilize, that's completely up to the individual pool. We don't care. We just know the, you know, respiratory vaccines, Clostridial, our standard vaccination protocol, a Pastorella vaccine. Those things are all required. We would ask that you also vaccinate your cow herd, not just the calves, but that the cows get an annual vaccination as well, just to help build that immunity in those calves prior to birth. And so that's kind of just the gist of where we're at on what we require. And then you really need to get in contact with the local folks and see how you can participate with them.
I want to add something to that, if I can. Is that all right? You know, we talk a lot about calf pools, and we've been big advocates, Kevin has, I have through my whole career, of calf pools and weaning calves, mainly preconditioning of calves through the weaning process. And, you know, in reality is we through these programs, we reach a small percentage of feeder cattle in the state of West Virginia. But, you know, but there's something that we can do that everybody has an opportunity to do, and that is just to simply vaccinate. You know, if we can start there, you know, with so many people, we don't want to say, well, you know, we want you to wean calves. I think I've come to a point, as I've watched all the producers around, if we can just get producers to vaccinate their cow one time a year and vaccinate a feeder calf, ideally twice, but if he can just get one, if he's going to sell that calf through a regular sale, which is where most of the cattle are sold, if he can just put a respiratory and a bacterial pneumonia vaccine in that calf at least one time, it would be amazing. And I think Kevin would agree with me, the effect we would have on death loss and treats. And that's a starting point. And I mean, and because a lot of guys just simply do not want to do not want to wean. And I understand that. I'm willing to accept that. But what I'm not willing to accept is that it's not that difficult to get a shot in something. And let's face it, bottom line is all this stuff we talk about doing comes down to this. It comes down to saving that calf's life and keeping him alive. That's all we're trying to do. We're just trying to keep him, trying to reduce the chance or the risk of him picking up some kind of a respiratory virus or bacterial respiratory pneumonia that's going to take him out. And that's the biggest challenge we have, and all these things we do. But if we can start, and that's what we did last night with our meeting, and that's what we're doing, is to encourage and that's what this pilot project with the Department of Ag and Cooperation with Extension and the calf pools and the local markets is to let's get a respiratory shot in those calves. If we can do that, that's a huge start. And now we've beat this thing for a long time. We've been talking about this since I've been working, but it seems like right now we've got to push. And I think facilities and things are more available to people than they've ever been before. People are more aware of facilities, and they're simple, not complicated, a head shoot, small there. We'll have a huge impact on treats and dead cattle. And I think that's what it all comes down to.
Well, I just say that a lot of things that we're talking about, we require as part of the program, but it's just the right thing to do, is to go through the process of preparing the cattle for the next stage of production.
Yep.
And so we have to think of it, I think, in that context, is what's the right thing to do for the calf, for the buyer of the calf. And if it's the right thing to do for those, it's the right thing for us as well. Because if we get to those points where our local buyers are starting to see a reduction in their treatments, they're seeing value in that, then that increases the value of those cattle in a local market to them as well, in whatever the market situation may be. So to me, that's, I really want to look at things from what is the value of the gain that I'm putting on those cattle versus my cost of gain. And where can I create the most value for myself? But I have to also look at that, I think, in the context of preparing those cattle for the next stage and what is the right thing to do in doing that.
We do have a question from the audience. Tammy asked, is there a web page for the state's calf pools? And if so, does it explain the basic requirements you just went over?
Yes, if you go to the WVU Extension website under agriculture and livestock, and then beef cattle, there's a feeder cattle marketing page that has all that. You can also just look, Google search WVU Extension calf pools, and that direct link to that feeder cattle marketing web page on the extension website will come up. Those program rules and stuff are all posted there.
And your local extension agent in our office will probably have some printouts. I know I always keep a couple handy printouts here, and it's got all the rules, regulations, shot requirements, different types, and program offer as well. So if you're getting on here, hopefully you probably can navigate through that. But if you're having trouble, get with your local extension agent in your county, and they'll be able to get that for you.
I mean, I guess I look at it like this, if we're fortunate enough to have the opportunity to be able to manage some land and livestock, then it's our responsibility to give those animals the best life that they can have while we have control over them. And part of that is preparing them for whatever the next stage is in their life. And so I think, that's just part of our responsibility as an animal manager.
What about other ways? We talked about the calf pool, and we kind of, that's kind of the top of the line here in our area as far as sales go. What are other outlets are there to look at for these feeder cattle? If you are not part of that calf pool, what is your next step that would be the best avenue for it? this producer?
Well, we have a network and have for a number of years of graded feeder cattle sales locally. At all the markets that we have, I think, are still sponsoring those to a degree. Now, some markets have changed the structure of things, and we're not all in weight markets anymore. We have some outweight markets, and that changes how you structure those things. But I think the biggest thing that a lot of people fail to do is, with how social media and different things have changed our ability or for the markets to reach potential buyers, is just call that market, tell them what you got and when you're coming, and give them a chance to advertise your cattle. Give them a chance to talk to people and create some interest in what you have to sell. And that, I don't care if you've got 5 or 6, but if they're 5 or 6 good ones, and the market kind of knows who you are and what you've had in the past, and you call them up and say, this is the day I'm planning on coming, they're going to let somebody know that's going to have an interest in those animals. So I think it's being a little more proactive in our own marketing, not just saying, all right, there's a sale on Wednesday, so I'm going to load them up and take them there, and we'll just see what happens. Being more proactive is a huge component of, for just purely selling feeder cattle. I think that's probably our second and our primary option beyond the calf pools, especially if we're less than an individual load lot. Now, other board sales are an option if you have enough to sell your own 50,000 pound load of those cattle. And then certainly we've had a tremendous amount of increase in direct marketing if you have the ability to continue to feed and finish those cattle and take them to a harvest endpoint.
What about these calves, that everyone has a couple calves every year that, you're not going to market with your regular market cattle, because some of these pools, we have a standard, and not everything is going to make that standard. Okay. So what is a good outlet for maybe some of these calves that might be a little short, or you maybe have a problem, had a pink eye or something, and just have a pool is only as strong as its weakest link. And so that's why we have a standard, because we're selling quality. So what is the best outlet that you would see, going for these calves that might not fit in that, a strategy there? Would stockyard would probably be your best option there?
Well, in most cases that may be your only option, but we also have another feedlot program that a lot of those cattle that would receive pretty significant discounts in a traditional marketing avenue, where you can participate in that. It's a retained ownership through harvest program, so we'll organize those cattle together. If you can put groups together with your neighbors or something locally, and then we help facilitate lining up trucking and those kind of things, and finding a feedlot pen with feedlots that we've had a long-term relationship with. And then it's a retained ownership program. You just send those cattle there, and your feed bill and everything is deducted from your sale proceeds when those cattle are harvested. So that's one way that you can actually take some of those animals that may have been discounted, and when they're marketed on the rail, you don't see that discount that we would in a local market as from a feeder cattle standpoint.
Now there's a time frame with that. You kind of got to know a little bit earlier than November before that happens, right? Do you know the time frame on that?
Ideally, yes, but we'll still have maybe a load or so of cattle that won't leave out of here until December to go to the feedlot. So, at this time of year, we're trying to gather up say some oddball yearlings, say replacement heifers that were kept that didn't breed, those kind of things, and fit those together into load lots. We've got to be able to fill a semi because we're going 1,000 miles with those cattle. So from an efficiency of trucking, we've got to be able to do that. But yeah, the earlier we know that there's something that's not going to fit, the better. It helps us do that. But we really need to have, say, for your all's part of the state, it'd be ideal if you could get enough people together just to make your own truckload of those, or at least a half a truck. So if we loaded half the truck somewhere else, they could stop there and pick them up and then go on.
All right. JJ?
I want to add something to that.
Go ahead, Steve.
All right. There's something that's become more popular, and I think the Outweight Cell kind of drove it a little bit, because Kevin mentioned earlier that the Outweight Cell, when you're selling calves on Outweight, then that eliminates an in-weight in-barn graded cell. And then I think what kind of evolved to try to capture some more cattle in the barn has happened here, and it's happening in some other cells in the state. And they're starting to take root, and that is in the month of November and the month of December, there is been identified a special cell at the regular cell, and it's been called a preconditioned pre-vac reputation cell at the regular cell barn in a regular cell setting. And they're marketing and advertising this cell to people that either you have double vaccinated your calves and are unweaned, or you have, and this is the more, I guess you'd say, ideal situation, where they're going ahead and still weaning the calves, and maybe that, and giving them their 2 vaccinations and bringing them to the cell barn and selling that set of calves by that producer. And that sale's becoming more and more successful here at our local cell barn, and it's had some success at some sales in other parts of the state as well. But here in particular, that thing's growing, and that sale is going to get better, and it's really drawing buyers. That's what's driving this thing. The buyers have found that sale, and they're starting to come. Background and local backgrounders are coming to that sale and buying those cattle. And they've had our follow-ups on those cattle have been very positive. Liking those calves typically are weaned and under the same criteria as our calf pool, but maybe they don't want to be a member of a pool, or for whatever the reason, but they can still do this program and bring them to the in barn and sell them that way. And I think you're going to see that sale get stronger and stronger, simply because of the fact that producers, background, and guys that are buying the cattle from him, we're getting real positive feedback on that. Anyway, I wanted to add that as another marketing option too. So
Thank you, Steve. JJ, you've been quiet.
still quiet.
Got JJ.
Oh, technical difficulty, or it might be me.
JJ,
Sorry,
you
I was-
got to unmute there.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, Kevin, what's the data out there? Steve was talking about one of the main things we need to do is vaccinate these calves. On average, for a 7-way shot and your respiratory and your labor, about how much per head does it cost to vaccinate a calf?
Well, if we're going to look at, and I would see those, I'm going to say doing it twice, because what the cost is doing it twice, because that's what the labels will call for, is a booster on those. It depends on the brand and the products that you're using. All right. And I'm going to look at it from the perspective of a modified live vaccine versus a killed virus on the respiratory side of things. Just in cost of the vaccine, you're going to be, say, $12 to $18 a head for 2 rounds of that vaccine. All right. And then you can, labor is going to be dependent upon the number of calves you're dealing with, how good your facilities, how efficient can you be moving those through there. But for 2 times through the shoot, you can probably say, we're going to add another $2 to $3 for labor. So I'd say, we could say 15, 20 bucks a head is what it's going to cost you to go through that process. It'd be a kind of a safe bet.
Yeah, that just losing one calf to blackleg would eat up all the costs you save from not vaccinating your calves. As a second part to that question, Kevin, what maybe explain to our audience if anyone's not familiar, what's the big advantage, or why do you recommend to use the modified live instead of the killed, especially for the respiratories?
Well, you've probably seen, if you've read Beef Magazine or Drovers, there's been some conflicting information come out about that now with, and it's limited studies saying that, well, the killed vaccine, or the modified live, we're getting issues with fertility in cows or something if we're using that. And so that's only really one study that showed any of that stuff. But the immune response is so much greater with that modified live vaccine versus the killed version. So we get a stronger immune response. We get a greater percentage of the cattle to respond. And understand that's why there's booster vaccinations, is mostly because we screw up. When we vaccinate cattle, we don't get 100% of them to respond, even if we did everything right. Not 100% of them are going to respond to the vaccine. Maybe we didn't get a needle placed exactly correctly for one of them. Maybe say the vaccine set just a little too long, got too warm, so the last couple doses weren't any good. And so the booster is really is kind of an insurance policy to make sure that we get as close to 100% of those cattle to have an immune response to that vaccine as possible.
All right, thank you.
Another big portion of this program is, preconditioning and feeding. So there's different routes you can go. You can go with a simple 12%, the cheaper route, or you can go with something with a little bit of a growth promoter in it. It's a little bit more expensive. What is, and this, I'm going to ask both of you this question because I want to hear, from a producer standpoint, in the calf pool, and then Dr. Shaffer's standpoint as well. We start with Dr. Shaffer. What is the best feed to feed these? I mean, if we're looking at basic 12%, corn versus something with a growth promoter, and everything in between, where would you fall on that? I know it's kind of an opinion question as well.
Well, the best feed is grass, because it's the cheapest. So I'm going to base it. It's going to depend on what kind of forage that you have. Because the forage is going to serve as the base of the ration for what we're doing. And so it's going to depend on forage. And then when we look at whatever supplement we're going to do with that, to supplement that forage, there's two factors to that. Like I said, the base forage, and then also what's the value of the gain that we're going to put on those cattle, and where does the purchase cost of that supplement put us from a cost of gain standpoint. So in general, if we have a really good stockpiled pasture that we can wean those calves on, that's a high quality pasture, number one thing we need to do is make sure we set some good long stem dry hay to those cattle, just so we can regulate passage rate of that, and help them regulate their gut. And in that scenario, we can get away with just providing mostly some energy supplementation. So something that's cheaper, even just a ground corn and at a lower rate, or a corn soybean meal mix. At that point, if we have a low quality stockpile pasture, or we are in a dry lot situation where we've just got hay to those calves, then moving up in terms of quality into some of the commodity based pellets that are going to be a more expensive kind of product, but a more complete feed, are going to be the direction we want to go. So, that's kind of each end of the spectrum is the way I would look at it. But I mean, the big thing I'm going to say is we really need to know what our cost of gain is and what the value of that gain is. And so you can start to, you know, think about some of that. And I think it's important producers understand how to calculate value of gain. And the key to that is that only thing we need a price per pound for is to calculate total dollars per head. And total dollars per head is all that matters. Dollars per pound don't matter. It's total dollars per head. So say we look at a 5-weight calf worth $1.50. I'm going to use not that these are accurate values, they're just makes the math easy in my head. Okay. Well, that calf is $750. In general, in our calf pool programs, if producers are feeding the cattle to a level, an appropriate level, we're going to get delivered about 2 pounds a day gain on those cattle. And so it's easy to say 100 pounds. We're going to add 100 pounds. So if that 600-pound calf now becomes worth $1.40, okay? Actually, we would hope he's worth more than that, right? Since we're preconditioning. But if the market tells us right now he's worth $1.40, 600-pound calf at $1.40 is an $840 calf. So for our value of gain, what we would do is we'd take that $840 for our 6-weight calf, subtract the $750 of our 5-weight calf, so that's $90, and we divide it by the total weight gain, 100 pounds. So the value of that gain is 90 cents. Okay. It's not $1.40, it's 90 cents for going from 5 to 600 pounds. Now, with the feed that we put into that calf, valuing our grass, our hay, whatever supplement we bought, and our time, the cost per pound of gain had better be less than 90 cents a pound, or we just did it for free. Now, in contrast, let's do a little different example with that 6-weight calf. Because we preconditioned him, is worth $1.50 a pound, just the same as the 5-weight calf would be if we just pulled him off the cow and took him to town. Now he's a $900 calf. And we've got 900 minus 750, our 500-pound calf at $1.50. Now that 100 pounds, we got $150 for that 100 pounds. So our value gains $1.50. Okay. So you can see there real quick, if I'm going to get my $1.50 for this, where's my cost to gain at? How much am I making for every pound that we put on that calf? I think that's an important thing for producers to understand how to do when looking at the market, looking at what feeds can we afford to feed and what performance are we going to expect from those feeds.
Okay, Steve, from a producer standpoint, I mean, we kind of run the numbers right there. How do you look at it as a producer and kind of, gauging that when you're feeding your cattle?
Well, for me as a producer, one thing that Kevin, all his points were very good points, and one thing he may have left out, and not pick on him, but the health benefit. Well, he initially said the best thing you can do is grass, and I 100% agree. Traditionally, so many of us, and I think we inherited this from our daddy and our granddaddy, is that they all wanted to pin stuff up in a barn and feed it. But like Kevin said, the best thing we have going for us is grass. And I'll add one thing to what he has said, and all the points that he made, and very good points. But there's a health benefit to going to grass too. And I think from my perspective, looking back, not only as a producer, but being able to see a lot of producers that have weaned in all different situations, the ones that to me are the most successful are the ones that have used or incorporated some kind of grass back into these weaned calves in terms of cheap gain. But to me, more importantly, healthier calves. I mean, that's proven over and over, and we know that. You can get something back. That's where they came from. They came from sunlight. Fresh water, and green grass. And that's what they's eating when we brought them. And that's where they ought to go back to. And then you can supplement them, just like he said, with a good long stem first crop hay, and add some, and you don't have to pour a lot of grain into the calf. it's not going to be 6 to 8 pounds a day. It can be 2 to 4. And we have guys that do that, and they have a lot of success doing that. But for me, I like grass. It works very good for us. We go back out on grass, and we'll supplement with a long stem first crop hay. We'll supplement with 2 to 4 pounds of grain a day. And I think that is the best scenario and the best situation that we can put those calves in. And I just I really like the idea of going on grass. So, and that's going to be the most profitable for us. It has been year in and year out. And I understand that not everybody's able to do that, but it's not as hard as you think. And you got to get yourself out of that rut and that mindset of a barn and think outside the box a little bit. And you can find a 2 or 3 acre grass lot for them calves to move out into, maybe even 4 to 6 acre lot. We have several guys in our calf pool now that are doing that, and they found they really like it. They get those calves back out on grass and get them off that concrete and get them back out where they came from. So
the most expensive words in agriculture are because we've always done it that way.
that's right. Yep.
Steve, would you say what would you say that the maximum? Because that we always have some producers that are wanting to, well, if 2 to 4 pounds of grain is good, then I'm feeding more. What's a max of where we're going to outweigh the benefit of feeding maybe, and we're going to maybe get these calves too fat before we send them out to the feed lot?
Well, goes back to what Kevin said. Every situation is different, but there's one thing that's constant in all that. And I mean, if you're looking at feed consumption and how much you're going to feed a calf, and we deal with this with all the different producers that we deal with all the time. Producers like to feed naturally. That's for the guys that do wean. A lot of them like to feed, and the problem with that is when you go to market in that calf, on the other end for the buyer, those guys don't like to buy a lot of flesh or fat. They don't. And the reason why they don't is because that's gain that they're paying for that they would like to in a concentrated feed situation. And that's what they're there for. Those guys, particularly on the 6 and the 7 weight calves, come out of these preconditioning programs. Typically, those calves are going to go into some kind of a concentrated diet, and they're going to go on. It's called compensatory gain. Those guys like to get a little gain too. And these buyers don't like calves fed 8, 10 pounds a day. But you can see it in the cattle when they've been fed that hard for 45 to 60 days. They start to smooth. They tend to get fleshier. And the cattle are not ideal for the buyer. And we're trying to do this nice balance between what's good for us, which is a nice 2 pound a day gain, which usually comes back to about a 4 pound, 5 pound a day with good dry hay gain for us. It's not too much for the next guy. And so you have to be careful. And we battle that with some producers. They like to feed, and we have to make them understand that that's not always the ideal flesh condition for the buyer. So you gotta be careful there,
Well, I think if you want to use a rule of thumb, one, you've got to be able to calculate your cost of gain, but really on our supplement basis, we do not want to exceed 1% of body weight.
Yes. Yes.
All right. We've had some really great discussion here. I do have to ask a question of both Steve and Kevin. I'll start with Kevin. Kevin, who is your favorite country music artist? Putting you on the spot here.
Well, I don't care for any of them that are on the radio now. So I'll say
Old
George
school.
Strait.
George Strait. Well, we've had someone vote for him before. Do you have a favorite George Strait song?
I guess I should know. Not really. Can't remember. We had
Amarillo by Morning. That's my favorite of his.
that no work.
George Strait. Steve, who's your favorite country artist?
You know, it's going to be between two guys that I like a lot, George Strait and Jason Aldean.
Jason Aldean. That's first vote for him. What's your favorite song from Jason
Oh
Aldean?
gosh, I love them all. I'm just going to cover it like that. He ain't got a bad one.
Okay. Yeah. JD, you have any more questions? I think we've had some really good discussion here about marketing our feeder calves, calf pools, vaccinations, all that, everything that we've talked about. Do you have anything else you want to ask?
Yeah, I think we covered what we have time to cover, because we get too deep into the weeds, we'll be here another 45 minutes. So, but anyway, I really, I'll go ahead and wrap us up then.
Hey, John David.
Yeah.
I do. Before we do wrap up here, do we have any questions from our participants
Yes.
that aren't agents? If they want to unmute themselves or type in the chat box, they have a question we haven't thought of today.
I think we may be good. Thank you. Oh, did we have any questions there? Oh, you got a chat. Hold on.
Thank you for doing this.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, you're welcome. Thank y'all for joining in. We always appreciate everyone joining in here on the Talk, the voice of West Virginia agriculture. And until next time, we'll see you around the ridge.